In this second episode of C64's gaming history of year 1987, we're gonna cover 20 more amazing games. And they are some of the best indeed. If you liked earlier Trailblazer, then Cosmic Causeway Trailblazer 2 is more of the same, but believe it or not, even more difficult. But that was a part of charm for the first game, and it's still for this one. The premise is very simple: you're a checkered red and white ball, and you have to get from beginning to the end of each level unscathed, and within the time limit. All of the unused time is added up to your score upon level completion. There are 24 levels overall, and they're composed of differently colored tiles. Each of them works a bit different. Red slows you down, green speeds you up, cyan squares mess with your controls reversing them, blue squares trigger involuntary jump, and finally black are the holes that have to be avoided. There are also aliens here and there, but they're more of a nuisance rather than a serious obstacle as they can be shot. Hitting white blobs awards you credits, which then can be spent between the levels for purchasing bonuses and power-ups for the next level. And this can be time slowdown, removal of all black holes, purple squares deactivation, and a shield. Trailblazer 2, same as the first title, requires a very specific type of a gamer to be enjoyed. One that doesn't mind being punished and pushed around for a while until they memorize some of those considerably more demanding latter stages. It's not necessarily me, but I don't mind either of the titles in the earlier stages too much. Crossroads is a game that I never played in the 80s, and it's a shame as it looks like something I would have loved. It was not a commercial software, however, and was largely distributed through a code listing in a computer Mac that the user had to type in, mind you, double and triple checking everything, and then save as the machine code and run. I don't have to tell you how often gaming Macs that printed those codes for simple games had errors in them. It was a nightmare. Crossroads, however, at least as far as I know, contained no errors. It is basically Wizard of War on steroids. It was faster, more hectic, and full of unpredictable and pure fun action. Same as original, it's played from top-down view and it features 9 different in design, behavior and gameplay mechanic enemies. Since the maze is much larger than in Wizard of War, at any given moment there can be many more enemies on the screen at once than you've ever seen in the original. They all have been given certain behavioral patterns too, and each of them have their own enemies among their kind, so they're not only actively fighting you, but also between themselves. All that combined with monsters exploding from time to time upon death proved to be not only enchanting, but also hella fun to play. And I so wish I would have had the chance to experience it then, as it would have definitely landed comfortably in my daily gaming rotation. Dark Castle is an action platformer in which you play as Prince Duncan, who has to get to the evil Black Knight and defeat him, all the while avoiding dangers and solving occasional simple puzzles. The game is composed out of 14 sections, 14 levels overall. In first 2 sections you have to not only survive, but also obtain Fireball and Shield respectively. They will be helpful on your way to the villain. He is seated in the castle's throne room, where you'll face him and will have to topple his throne by pulling several levers. Dark Castle was originally a Macintosh game and was later on ported to other systems, C64 among them. And on that original hardware it was the first game ever to use WSAD and mouse controls, and also one of the first games to include an Easter egg. In this particular case, if you played the game on, or set your max date to 25th of December or Friday the 13th, the Great Hall and Throne Room respectively would have appropriate decorations. Deathlord is a top-down role-playing very similar in its technical design to Ultima games, but set in fantasy medieval Japan. The Deathlord and his army are ravaging the lands of Japan, and Emperor Nakamoto calls upon adventurers to save the country and defeat the evil Deathlord. You're obviously the one to lead them to victory. Or failure, as the game is considerably more demanding than Ultima games were. There's 8 different races and 16 classes to choose from during party creation, so there's a lot to mix and match here to customize the experience to your liking. There's also 84 spells in the game, and while their names are in Japanese, as you use them you'll quickly realize which is which, as they're in majority of cases a staple spells of the genre. And believe it or not, but Deathlord is another RPG that allows for importing of characters from Bard's Tale, Ultima and Wizardry. So if you were an avid RPG gamer in the 80s and bought most titles in the genre released by EA, chances are you could move your party of heroes between what feels like a dozen of games at least. Deathlord is pretty large, taking place over a dozen of continents filled with countless cities and dungeons. It is easily over 100 hours worth of adventuring. Defcon 5 is a game I had no chance of understanding when it came out. I was too young and I was more into arcade action-based games as most kids are. When I hit the right age eventually, I was already on the Amiga, and back then coming back to C64 felt not only unnecessary, but also pointless. I mean, why would I use an inferior, slower and less sophisticated system? Life, it seems, is not without a hint of irony. And I'd love to have all the older systems now. Anyway, Defcon 5 proudly rode on 1983's War Games movie fame, and it done it pretty well, I must add. You're a DoD operative and have to use ballistic missile defense system to protect the United States from an upcoming nuclear attack. But if you think that it sounds like a great ground for an action game, then you're wrong. I mean, you're not technically wrong, it would have been epic, but Defcon 5 is all about details. Most game is played using your keyboard, so you'll be switching between various screens filled with data, gathering information from ground, land and space detection systems in order to detect and destroy incoming ballistic missiles. But most of all, you'll be typing loads upon loads of codes between all the screens. It may not sound very exciting, but once you get into the whole incoming annihilation atmosphere, you'll love it. Delta aka Delta Patrol is horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up. Terran merchant fleet going through a region of space known only as Delta has gone missing. It is believed that evil aliens operate from within the region, so someone must go there and scout what gives. As in most games we've talked within the last couple dozen of different gaming history episodes, that someone is once again you. I don't tell you that often, but you're the best. I mean, you are sitting at home now watching this video, probably having a drink or eating a meal. Enjoy it, by the way. But when you don't, you've got your hands full, saving universes, worlds, planets. Man, I wish I could be you. Anyway, you go alone through 32 increasingly more difficult levels fighting off an alien menace. They usually come in set formations of ships, and Delta is one of those titles that require pattern memorization for any chance at success. Destroying a particular wave of enemies entirely earns you credits, which are used to add additional equipment, increasing ship's firepower, shield and speed. Delta's graphics are pretty nice, perhaps not groundbreaking, but definitely some of the best for the year the game released in. Sound on the other hand is decent, but nothing to write home about. All in all, Delta is more than your average shoot 'em up, and if you're a fan of the genre, you'll have a lot of fun here. I really like Demon Stalkers, the Raytom Doomfiend's title screen. It's beautifully drawn, epic and sets the mood for gameplay. Oh, it's also the title screen for this entire video, just so you know. Anyway, for all intents and purposes, Demon Stalkers, a game with one of the longest titles in 1987, is Gauntlet clone for 1 or 2 players. Actually, it's a little disservice to the game calling it just a clone, but gameplay-wise, it's basically that. But with a difference that your ultimate goal is to complete 99 levels to get to the 100th, where you'll face a final boss of the game. It may be small change, but makes a difference as it gives you a goal to aim for. Graphically, Demon Stalkers is pretty nice, not the best I've seen, but definitely one of the better within the whole sea of Gauntlet-like games. Music is nothing to scoff at either, and while not Rob Hubbard good, it's not too annoying. What's best about Demon Stalkers though, is the fact that it includes a built-in level editor, that not only allows you to create those, but also build a story around them. So if you're patient and talented, you may very well make an even better game out of it. Oh, and the game's one of the earlier examples of clickbait, or in this particular case playbait. Because while the aforementioned title screen features a man and a woman, even in multiplayer you can only play as men. Escape from Paradise is an action platformer. You play as Joe, a man who owns and lives in incredibly complex labyrinth-like mansion burrowed deep underground. Now it's an amazing life for a Twitch streamer, but not for most others. And Joe woke up one day finding his house invaded by aliens. So he decides to escape. And this is where you jump in, taking control of the matchstick Joe. You have to help him escape with his life intact, which in case of Escape from Paradise is easier said than done. The game is really difficult, and finding yourself in a loop of death and repeat is not something unusual in it. So unless you enjoy really tough games, I'd suggest perhaps approaching the game from time to time on an emulator where you can save your progress, getting that tiny bit further with each attempt. Express Raider, aka Western Express, is a port from the arcades, and it's a shoot-em-up beat-em-up mixture. I know, weird, but works together quite well actually. The game is divided into 2 sections. First is a beat-em-up where you fight your way through the train station and then later on the train using combination of kicks and punches. As you go from the last wagon to the locomotive, you'll fight enemies on the train roof while avoiding projectiles thrown and shot at you. In the second level, you're horseback riding alongside the train shooting at the enemies. There's a certain number of these you need to defeat per wagon, but you must be extra careful not to shoot the innocent, some of which will throw bags of money at you that need to be collected. After completing the game, it starts from the beginning, just at raised difficulty level. Express Raider is a fun title for a game or two and a treat for fans of Western themes and action games alike. Face Off is a hockey game made by the same people who were responsible for the popular series of hardball games, and it's as good as these were. You can play a single exhibition game, entire season, or go straight to the playoffs to fight for the Stanley Cup. The game is viewed from the side perspective most of the time, apart from attacks on goals by the opposing team when it switches to the shotcam and allows you to defend the goal. Once in a while, when nasty foul is committed, the players involved may fight it out, and the winner gets to stay on the ice while the loser is sent to a penalty box for a bit. Some very superficial management options are also present in the game, so you can design your own plays, modify the lines, move players from your minor league team to the major and vice versa, and trade with other teams in the league. It's not something I would have expected from a hockey game on an 8-bit machine, to be honest, so it's a very welcome and nice addition. The game can be played by up to 2 players on a single system, either cooperatively or in competitive mode, and if there's one thing I could really complain about is the lack of real-life teams and players, as Face-Off did not secure the NHL license. It features option to rename both though, so if you'd like to, you can recreate the league of your dreams. Fans of the sport will love it, others may not. In Falcon the Renegade Lord, you play as a Time Lord hunting down a renegade agent of time. To clarify, time agents have to patrol the timelines, making sure that no one interferes with space-time continuum. Said Renegade does just that, causes disruptions by dropping artifacts in different time zones, destabilizing the timeline. It can cause large-scale destructions of different time zones and threaten the very existence of mankind. You, our unquestionable hero, have to prevent that by traveling to affected time zones and recovering the misplaced artifacts. You can only carry one at a time, so whenever you pick one, you have to return it to its correct chronological period. If that was all, however, the game would be a cakewalk, so in each of the zones that you visit, inhabitants who know no better will attack you all the freaking time, completely unaware that you're there to save them. You have your jetpack and a laser gun, however, so with use of these, you'll make sure to complete your mission. As you play, you also find power-ups from time to time, bad time travel pun intended, and they can be either a power that will freeze all the natives' movements for a few seconds or an invisibility. Falcon the Renegade Lord is fun, it sports an interesting story for a platformer at least, and pretty good graphics. I like it, whether you will, it's entirely up to you. Despite what it may look like at first glance, Fire Galaxy is not just another Galaga clone. While you still move your ship at the bottom and shoot upwards at the enemies that appear at the top of the screen, they do not just stay there waiting to be killed. Instead, they swoop down near immediately, shooting at you in random patterns. So it's considerably more demanding game than original was. But there's a twist. You don't really have to kill all the enemies, just survive the waves that they come in unscathed. Every few levels there's a bonus stage where enemies do not shoot and just have to be destroyed for points. They move about quite quickly though, so it's pretty difficult to get all of them every single time. You start with 3 lives, get an extra 20,000 points and then every 30,000. And up to 8 players can play Fire Galaxy alternating. It's a fun, even if bit simple game, so will most likely appeal to the fans of the original the most. Firetrap is a port from the arcades. You're a firefighter. Or not, who knows. You do, I don't, but in the game you are one. And you have to rescue 16 damsels in distress trapped on top of 16 burning skyscrapers. What a terrible day that must be for the city. I mean, there's 16 skyscrapers burning all at once, and there's only one firefighter who can put them out and save the ladies. Even worse, he has to scale the walls rock climbing style with no straps to securing and no one waiting at the bottom to save him in case he falls. A terrible dark day for the city, and the firefighter indeed. Still, as you climb up, you can put out fires with your water gun, you get to rescue trapped people and animals, and have to avoid all kinds of falling down objects and fire sparks. It is not easy. Every now and then you'll find a power-up that either allows you to spray water in all 3 directions at once, or give you a temporary invincibility, or boost you a few floors up. Firetrap is fun in short bursts from time to time, but I wouldn't want to invest a whole afternoon just to complete it. Flying Shark, aka Sky Shark, is a top-down vertically scrolling shoot-em-up and another port from the arcades. It's a decent, solid shooter with a lot to offer to the fans of the genre, but not necessarily to your average Sunday gamers. And why is that? Well, while the game was infamous for being quite demanding in the arcades, it's even more so on Commodore's system. The enemy shots are even faster than in original and so difficult to spot on the bright backgrounds that half of your deaths will be entirely surprising with seemingly no way of telling where the bullet came from. If you give it your full attention though, focus, and play through a level or 2 few times to familiarize yourself with how things are, there is a fun to be had here. The graphics are colorful and varied in terms of both backgrounds and enemy design, and the sounds are pretty spot on too. You start with 4 lives, a single shot and 3 bombs, but as you play you may upgrade your weapon even up to 6 times. All 5 levels of the original are present on the C64, with a noticeable omission of a large enemy plane at the end of the 5th one. Which, while annoying, is not something that should detract you from playing. If you like tough games, give it a go. If you don't, then, well, don't. Force 7 is suspicious, but I'll circle back to it in a moment. You're in control of 7 different crew members, each with their own unique characteristics, and you're sent to an energy production plant on a planet Caris to rescue survivors and dispose of any aliens that are still there, holding people captive. You're armed with a flamethrower that you use against the aliens, but must be extremely careful operating it not to harm the innocent. As you go about saving civilians, you also come across ammo recharges, grenades and health. And you gotta keep the last in constant check, as each contact with an alien depletes it a little. And when it's all gone, your character dies and you have to pick another from the initial 7. Now let's get back to the suspicious, because Force 7 looks and feels a lot like an alien game that failed to secure the license. For one, there's the title screen that does not leave a lot to the imagination, just take a look at it. And then there's 7 characters you get to control, the exact number of crew members on Nostromo from the Alien. And finally, the alien design and weapon you use against them is taken straight out of the movie. So, I have no idea if I'm right or wrong, but Force 7 feels as if it was supposed to be something else and just lack of licensing rights prevented it from being so. Toasty! Garfield is an arcade adventure featuring everyone's favorite lazy cat and his friends, Nermal his cousin and Odie the dog. Story-wise, Garfield's girlfriend was caught and locked in the city's kennel, and Garfield, despite his hate for doing anything other than eating lasagnas and napping, sets out to rescue her. To progress within the game, Garfield needs to find, pick up and either use objects in appropriate places or exchange them with other characters. And he can only carry as much, but thankfully both Odie and Nermal can help him with that. While you go about your mission of love, there's 2 things to keep an eye on, specifically sleep and hunger meters. They have to be kept replenished at all times, as if either ever drops to 0, the game will end. So you'll need to do both, eat and rest. As a kid, when I played it, I was amazed by the quality of graphics, but didn't have the slightest clue what to actually do in the game. So I always ended up losing sooner rather than later. Today I do get it all, but is the Garfield worth my time to replay it? Honestly, I'm not sure. On one hand, Gauntlet II is still the same good old Gauntlet, just with 100 more dungeons to explore. And on another, it's still same good old Gauntlet, just with 100 more dungeons to explore. And yeah, I realize what I just said and how it sounds. There's still 4 classes to choose from, still more enemies that you could count spawning left and right, and going right for you. And still as much chaos as in the first game. There are however some small changes to the gameplay formula, like the It enemy that aims to make contact with a player, and when he does, all enemies go straight towards that player only. It can be fun in multiplayer, but makes no difference in single. The only way of ridding yourself of that curse is either to touch another player or get to the exit. Then there's the special skill pickup that allows for ricocheting shots of walls, there are acid puddles, and a large dragon that requires quite a few hits to destroy. Is that enough to warrant a follow-up? Perhaps it is, but for me it's still the same game, just a tiny bit different. And while Gauntlet is always fun with a friend, I'd never run it to play alone. Oh, and Gauntlet 2 has jerkier scrolling than the first one for some unknown reason, and I think it's worth noting. The Great Giana Sisters. Probably the most famous and iconic side-scrolling platformer on C64. Anyone who had the system either had it, or at the very least heard of it. It rode on popularity of incredibly well-known and loved Super Mario Bros. And tried to mimic it to the point that the first couple of levels look nearly identical. This obviously lit up alarm lights in the offices of the Big N, and they quickly lawyered up and jumped in with a cease and desist. And Giana had to be pulled off the shelves. Now, did developers had the case and could argue that the game was inspired only, and the imitation is the sincerest form of flattery? Perhaps, but could they stand against a giant like Nintendo and hope to survive most likely years-long court case unscathed? I doubt that. So, Giana ceased to officially exist. Unofficially, copies were available everywhere in more or less legal form, and the game became a legend. So the Giana Sisters is composed out of 32 levels, filled with bodies and platforms to jump on, with some notable differences to Mario. Well, for one, Giana is not a plumber, and there's no Luigi. There's Maria, but I doubt that she's a plumber either. When they grab a power-up that in Mario makes him grow twice in size, girls change appearance and look like 80s pop stars, with big colorful hairdos and strong makeup. But the power-up itself actually works similarly, allowing both sisters to destroy most blocks. Oh, and there's another difference between the games. There's quite a few less blocks that can be destroyed in Giana, or a lot more of these that can't. Tomato tomato. All the enemies are different, and many not only in graphics but also in the way they behave, and from 3rd level onward the differences in level design get more and more noticeable, to the point that eventually the levels don't seem to have much to do with those in Mario. All of what I just said aside, the Great Giana Sisters is really fun. and a proof of concept that Commodore could have a game similar in design to Mario. Arguably, it had many more as good platformers, but neither was as iconic. Oh, I know there was an unofficial Mario port released a couple of years ago, but it's neither classic nor it runs on basic C64, requiring a considerable investment in upgrades. Gunrunner is a side-scrolling shooter based on the classic game Choplifter. Same as in the original, you move horizontally both left and right, looking for survivors to save, pick up and deliver to safety. You pick them up by flying as low as possible, which allows winch to lower and collect them. As you do, both fly and look for them, and then try to get them, you will be attacked by various enemies. They obviously need to be either shot or avoided, but let's be honest here, preferably shot. Whatever you do, however, don't let them shoot or touch you, as it will cost you 1 life, and you start with 3 only. Other than the machine gun, you're equipped with 3 smart bombs, which are your best way of saving your skin when there's seemingly no way to run, clearing the entire screen. And while they can't be picked up per se, you get an additional one after each level completed, so make sure to keep them as a last resort. While Gunrunner is incredibly simple in its gameplay loop, the beautiful graphics with multi-level parallax scrolling and decent sounds make it a pleasure to play. Hat Trick is, I don't know, a third, fourth game in this video that's a port from the arcades? Never mind. Compared to the previous hockey game we've spoke about today, it seems very Spartan in options and game modes available. It is not for no reason, however, because it seems to be directed towards a different kind of a player. While Face Off was aiming more at simulation fans, Hat Trick is about pure action and fun. Each team only has 2 players, a field one and a goalie, and the game is played for points. There's no advanced rules, no falls, no outsides, just shooting goals and making sure none is scored against you. Each game only lasts 3 minutes, there's no change of sides, and if after 3 minutes there's no clear winner, an overtime of 1 minute is added. If it ends with a draw, the score stays a draw. While all this may make Hat Trick hectic and often feeling crazy fast, it's just a lot of fun, even if you don't care about the sport in the slightest. As I'm working my way through 1987, I'm beginning to feel that the year may have been the very best game-wise for C64. Same as 1993 was for the Amiga. Plenty of iconic titles released for the system, some of the lesser known but incredibly fun games too, and overall the year felt to be chock full of amazing releases. If you were a C64 gamer in 1987, you had an amazing time all throughout it. What do you think about the year so far? Let me know in the comments below. Also make sure to subscribe not to miss the release of the next video. 70% of you are not subscribed, so you may never be sure if YouTube decides to send the video your way when it's released. Even better, if you hit the bell, new videos will not only land in your subs box, but you'll also get a short and friendly notification when they're there. So think about it. If you'd like to support my channel grow, I'd appreciate both Patreon and YouTube memberships. All the help I get allows me to release better content, and I currently slowly work towards replacing my editing PC. Members get access to my new videos a day early and are always in the loop on what I plan to release, change, introduce, etc. But if you can't or don't want to do that, likes and subscribes are great too. Most of all, however, I would like to thank all the YouTube Let's Play and Playthrough creators, from whose videos short bits were taken for this one as a video background to my commentary. You'll find all their names linking to their channels in the description below. They're amazing, and thanks to their efforts, retro community can prevail for years longer and in better form than it could have otherwise. So thank you. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.